All right, hello. Today we are continuing our journey down the Stephen King rabbit hole by taking a look at Mr. Mercedes, which is a more recent Stephen King novel and the beginnings of his Bill Hodges trilogy, and I suspect sort of a thread of storytelling that will keep showing up in any works kind of moving forward or many works moving forward. We'll get to that. Today, our review is accompanied by a Stone Delicious IPA. It's a citrusy India Pale Ale with lemon drop and Eldorado hops from the Stone Brewing Company. Yeah. So, Stone is brewed in Escondido, California, which is northern San Diego County. And apparently, they also have a place in Richmond, Virginia. Stone is a really popular and successful independent brewing company. Um, They have a beautiful building in Escondido. It's crazy. It's like this crazy garden. You dip down into this little valley and you hang out. It's gorgeous. But yeah, so that will be accompanying me as I review Mr. Mercedes and we get into some of the Bill Hodges stuff. All right. So Mr. Mercedes was published in June of 2014. It was preceded by Doctor Sleep in 2013, a novel I really like and we'll be reviewing shortly. It was followed in that same year, I believe, by Revival, which I've heard a lot of good things about in kind of the Stephen King booktube community. And so I don't have it yet, but I'm looking forward to reading that one. And then in 2015, it was followed by a sequel in the Bill Hodges trilogy called Finders Keepers, which I do own and will be reading at some point. And then the end of the trilogy, End of Watch in 2016, which is the end of the Bill Hodges trilogy, but not the end of that storyline, as we'll talk about towards the end of this review. Well, amongst fans, it seems like, based on what I've seen on YouTube and Goodreads, there's kind of a split between fans who love the Bill Hodges trilogy and fans who really don't enjoy it. Um, it did win some awards. It won in 2014 the Goodreads Choice Award in the mystery and thriller category, and in 2015 it won the Edgar Award for Best Novel from the Mystery Writers of America. Its average rating on Goodreads is a 3.94 out of 5, so it's basically 4 stars, so pretty high. Um, but if you go, at least every time I've been, the first couple of reviews are 2-star reviews, talking about a lot of reasons why people don't enjoy it. And I think they articulated their points really well, so we're going to get into that in a bit. Just a quick synopsis. It's not too spoilery. It's stuff that's either in the first chapter or two and on the dust jacket or the back of the book. So don't be too concerned with spoilers, although, I mean, the book just tells you some stuff at the very beginning. So, the opening of the book, I think, some people, I saw one person criticize it, but I think, and I think I'm in the majority here, that it was a really strong opening, at least that first couple pages, where you're introduced to all these characters waiting outside of an auditorium, kind of conference hall for a job fair. Now, the book starts in 2009 after the economy kind of went on a downturn. So these people are all desperately seeking jobs. These are the people out in the middle of the night, in line at the front, kind of camping out. And we're introduced to this guy and this young lady who has a baby. And it's kind of shown that she has nowhere else to take the baby, so the baby has to be with her. And we kind of bond with these people a little bit, and they are immediately killed. Someone shows up in a gray Mercedes sedan and runs down and murders at least 8 people, including this infant and her mother. And it's very grisly. From that, we are introduced to Bill Hodges, who is the detective on that case. He has retired after a long and distinguished career. He's a very decorated detective, very successful in his professional life. Although we are led to believe that because of his dedication to that professional life, his personal life has suffered. He's divorced, and his adult daughter doesn't come visit him and speaks to him occasionally, but not often. We're kind of led to believe that there's not really a relationship there. It may be explored in the sequels, I don't know, but it's you don't see any of his family in Mr. Mercedes. So we see Bill kind of with nothing to do now that he's not at work, sitting on the couch watching daytime television like Jerry Springer, and kind of feeling lost and adrift. A lot of drinking, a lot of eating, and toying with his father's service revolver, thinking about ending it all. That is until shortly after we meet him, he gets a letter from Mr. Mercedes himself, the Mercedes killer, kind of taunting him and egging him on into committing suicide. What this actually does is kind of motivate him to jump back in and try to tie up this loose end, which is the thing that reinvigorates him and kind of gives him purpose now that he's retired. An interesting part of the novel, I think, is that you see this transformation in Bill from when you meet him and when he's not really committed to the point where he becomes truly committed to this case, and he's a much different person. You can understand why he is the decorated detective once he transforms. Okay, so that's going to be the end of the non-spoiler territory. If you have not... Well, alright, hold on. Here are some criticisms and positive things about the story, and then I'll talk about my opinions, which will include spoilers. So still no spoilers, but here are the negative things that I have been seeing in a little bit of research about why people dislike Mr. Mercedes. Some people say that there are massive plot holes. I think there are some, but essentially it's basically how strong is your suspension of disbelief. If it's easily... you're knocked out of that, then you're probably not going to enjoy this book. If you have a pretty strong suspension of disbelief and you're willing to just let some stuff go, then this book is going to be fine. You're going to have a good time. One of the big parts of that is that people have a hard time with how King kept the conflict between Mr. Mercedes and Bill Hodges. You find out who Mr. Mercedes is pretty early on, and the book alternates between their perspectives, between the character who is Mr. Mercedes and between Bill Hodges. In fact, I'm going to check here. Yeah, okay. It literally tells you who Mr. Mercedes is on the back of the book, so I'm going to start using his name. So you kind of flip back and forth between Bill Hodges and Brady, who is Mr. Mercedes. And some people have a hard time with how King kept the conflict between these two people. Why Bill didn't go to the police. Since he is retired, he is no longer a part of that service. So why he didn't go to the police when he knows he's dealing with someone capable of inflicting harm onto others and not just onto him. And I think what happens, and I think what happened in a lot of the reviews, is that they saw the Bill that was projected outwardly. And what I mean is, there are several times throughout the book where Bill is talking to other characters and they are doing him favors, and it kind of has like quick inner monologues or like quick thoughts to himself about how he is so used to kind of presenting the face that he needs to present to different people to get them to tell him things in interrogation. And I think it's kind of showing that you're not supposed to believe necessarily that Bill Hodges is a great man, but you are supposed to believe he is a good detective that can produce results. And I think throughout the story, you're kind of shown that he becomes obsessed with this Mr. Mercedes because it is the only thing keeping him alive. This is what brought purpose back into his life, and he acknowledges that very quickly a couple times in the novel. And so I think he is supposed to be an Ahab-like character, obsessed with taking this guy down, and so he rationalizes why he can't go to the police, and he may have reasons he tells his colleagues or the people helping him, but I think ultimately it just comes down to that he wants to catch this guy, and to him, until it becomes personal, that's good enough to keep the police out of it, because at that point he's not going to be able to get next to this guy. But that is a criticism. Some people don't read it that way. That's how I read it. So that could be something that's hard to swallow. Another big thing is how this stacks up against his more classic works. And I think that's a little unfair. He's trying to step out and do something different. And, I mean, the guy's been writing since the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s, so he's going to be trying different things. And I think it's unfair to compare an artist's work like 40 years from what you consider his best stuff. Um, I mean, I don't think this, and I think by the nature of the story, it's not going to be able to stand up against things like The Stand or It, which are these things that deal with much larger themes and problems. This is kind of a tight procedural type thing, and I just think the very nature of the story means that it's not going to stand up well against stuff like that that's epic. Um, but I think it's still fun. As far as some of the positive things that I've seen, it is fast paced. That's what a lot of people think, and I tend to agree with that. I think you're going to be turning the pages. You're going to get through it pretty quickly. It is something new, so he is leaving behind that horror. There's nothing supernatural in this. There's one kind of scene that gets into like the grotesque, and I think he does a really good job. And I think it is a turning point, so he uses that skill to kind of show you where it's this big shift in what's happening. Even people who disliked or don't think that Brady's going to be memorable think that he is a villain that kind of fits in with our modern kind of view of the world and how things are post 9/11. It's this guy who's a little unhinged, who kind of blends in and uses the internet to kind of arm himself so that he can produce harm or create opportunities to harm others in a way that we can't predict really or protect against. He is able to infiltrate or manipulate our traditional safeguards and kind of fall through the cracks so that he has his opportunities for terror and destruction. I think all the characters in these books are really alive and feel fleshed out. Sort of. There's one or two who don't, but I think all the main characters. Bill definitely feels like a very distinct character, and whether you like him or not, I think he's going to be memorable. He's definitely been sticking in my head. I read Mr. Mercedes a few weeks ago, towards the beginning of October, and he's sticking in there even when I've been kind of just gorging myself on King books. For instance, to compare him to the main character in The Outsider, Ralph, I think Ralph is a very similar type of character, but he doesn't stand out to me and feel quite as real as Bill does. Holly, which is a character you meet halfway through the book, I think is a very distinct character and a character that I really enjoyed, even though I didn't think I was going to at first. I'm excited to see how she grows over the trilogy. Here are some spoilers, could be spoilerish, for The Outsider, one of King's newest books from this year, and for the later Bill Hodges. So if you don't want to hear, stop listening now. So Holly kind of appears halfway through The Outsider, and I wasn't expecting that. And I haven't read Finders Keepers or End of Watch, but I think she's a good character because I knew how she would act, and it felt really familiar. It felt like an old friend was coming into this new story. And I'll have my thoughts on how that all went down in The Outsider when I review that. But I think as a character, it does show that she's strong, that she can fit into a new story, a new universe kind of, and kind of play with other characters. And she stands out in that book as one of the better characters in it. And so I'm really impressed with her as a character, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Some of the characters like Jerome, maybe, he's distinctive, but I don't know, how much he's gonna stick in my head. I think Brady is memorable, not so much in his feelings, but like being that example of that kind of character, how these people kind of operate and slip through society, and that it's hard to tell. Especially after over the summer reading Columbine, which is a book that looks at the shooting in Columbine and the two kids who were the perpetrators, and sort of how it's so hard to tell when people are going to go that far out there to hurt others. I think it's definitely a good example of that. All in all, I would say that I enjoyed the Bill Hodges book, the first one. I have yet to read Finders Keepers. I bought it before I finished Mr. Mercedes because I knew that I liked this book good enough that I would read the sequel. However, I was not confident. Well, I knew it wouldn't be the next thing I read. I knew I was going to read a couple more King books before I got to it. And since I put down Mr. Mercedes, I think I've read 5 or 6 other King books, and I still haven't picked up Finders Keepers. So I think it's worth reading Mr. Mercedes. I'd give it a 3 out of 5, but it isn't one of his best books. And I'm really hoping that I like Bill. They grow on me more as I read the trilogy. I have a feeling they will, but you never know. So, as always, if you have any thoughts about Mr. Mercedes, leave them down below. If you've read the rest of the trilogy and you have any thoughts, throw them down there. I don't care if they're spoilery. I don't read for that. If you have any suggestions on which King book I should look at next, although I'm be honest with you, I've read like 8, so I've got some stacked up. I just need to film videos for them. But go ahead and throw them down below. Tell me what your favorite King book is, and as always, happy reading.